Imagine you're one of the biggest gun manufacturers in the world. You've got more than 100 years of history, millions of dollars in research and development, some of the smartest engineers in the industry, and yet you come out with a gun that fires when it's dropped. Now compare that to an Austrian dude that made curtain rods. Because in 1982, Gaston Glock, a man with exactly zero firearms knowledge before then, decided to enter the military pistol trials.
What am I gonna do?
He didn't have a board of directors to please or a legacy, he just did it for the love of the game. The only things he had were a bunch of shooters, a pile of polymer, and a deadline. And in just 3 months, he released the Glock 17. It was a gun so simple but so reliable that it completely obliterated the big players such as FN, Beretta, SIG. How did a curtain rod engineer completely destroy the entire military industrial complex in 3 months? Well, stick around to find out. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dennis at the Range. Today we're going to talk about the Glock Generation 6 and we're also going to talk about the history and how Glock came to this beautiful pistol. Make sure to stick around at the end of the video because I am going to take this to the range. For those who are new on the channel, my name is Dennis. I'm a French firearms enthusiast. I started this channel to share the stories behind the firearms that I like. I also do practical shooting, you can see right here. And I wanted to create this channel to track my progress, share my love of guns, and learn along the way. I'm just getting started on my journey, and there's a lot of exciting things coming on the channel, so make sure to subscribe to come along for the ride. Also, I have an Instagram, so make sure to follow me there. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it and comment down below your thoughts on the Gen 6. The story begins in Austria in the early 80s, when the Austrian army wanted to replace their military pistol. At that time, it was the Walther P38. And while it was actually a really good gun, their stocks were really aging and they were looking for something new. So, the Federal Ministry of Defense established 17 strict criteria for the new handgun. Those included self-loading capability, they had to be chambered in 9mm due to NATO, it had to be safe against accidental discharge because, you know, military conscripts, and it needed to withstand very high pressure ammo. So the requirement was there. And on the other hand, there was Gaston Glock. I'm interrupting this video to talk to you about CNP Tir. CNP Tir is a gun shop in Tours, which is about 3 hours away from Paris. And they're the gun shop that lent me most of the pieces that are in the channel. They are the first ones to believe fully in Dennis at the Range, so I really have to thank them a lot for that. And I'm really grateful. They just lent me the guns, I do whatever I want with them, and then I give them back. They have absolutely everything. And I was very surprised when I walked in and I saw all that there is here. They have all the latest things that come out from the industry, and they also have a bunch of old vintage rifles with a lot of history. They truly are a one-stop shop for anything related to firearms. I am right now in their vault, and you can see there's just everything. So again, thank you very much to CNP. Now let's get to the video. Gaston Glock was an Austrian engineer who primarily manufactured curtain rods and radiator parts. You know, things that go along very well, radiators and curtain rods. He had no prior background in firearms design, and he was 52 years old. So there's your cue for it's never too late to start. In 1982, he assembled a team of experts from the military, from police, practical shooters, and decided to create a pistol for the army. And in an insanely short amount of time, 3 months, they came up with the Glock 17. That, for the development of a gun, is insanely fast. There's gonna be other guns on the channel, such as the Daniel Defense H9, and that gun was already made. They had to redesign the gun and it took 4 years. Glock made a perfect design in 3 months. That is crazy. I mean, just take a look at SIG. They have millions of dollars, good engineers, and they still made the P320 accidentally discharge. And the Glock 17 was so good that it actually won the trials for the Austrian army, and it completely beat out FN, Beretta, HK, and other big manufacturers. And nobody created a plastic gun that completely blew the competition out of the water. Now, Gaston Glock did not have firearms experience, but he had polymer, and he thought that he could use this material to make the firearm lightweight and cost-effective. And so he did. The Glock 17's name doesn't really come from the fact that it can hold 17 rounds in the magazine, which it does, but it comes from the fact that there's 17 patents, and so it was officially adopted by the Austrian army as the P80, Pistol 80. In 1983, the United States Department of Defense invited Gaston Glock to submit the Glock 17 for military trials because the United States Army had the old 1911s that were actually aging. And Glock, unfortunately at the time, didn't have the manufacturing capacity for such a big order, However, the US weren't the only ones interested, because between 1983 and 1985, the Glock 17 was adopted by the Norwegian and the Swedish armed forces. And the gun was so good that it became the benchmark for NATO pistol testing. They were comparing other guns to the Glock 17, and 10 years later, by 1992, there were over 350,000 Glocks sold all around the world, with 250,000 being sold in the United States alone.
Give me a hell yeah!
Okay, we're almost to the Gen 6, but since this is number 6, it means that there were 5 other generations before. And yeah, the first generation was the one that was made in 1982. It was known for its pencil barrel and the pebble grip. Then they came out with the Generation 2, and they added a small plate right here to meet the ATF standards for United States importation. The Generation 3 that came in 1998 added an accessory rail, finger grooves on the grips, and there was a lot of different colors and variations. And the Glock Generation 3 is perhaps the most famous Glock generation of all of them. 12 years later, in 2010, the Generation 4 came out, where they upgraded the recoil spring assembly and improved some of the ergonomics, only to be replaced in 2017 by the Glock Generation 5, where they removed the finger grooves, they introduced the new Glock marksman barrel, and further refined the internal parts. And now, today, we have the Glock Generation 6. In the US market, they came out with 3 pistols. The 45, which is this one, the 17, which I have right here. They also came out with the iconic Glock 19, because how could you not? And in Europe only, they came out with the Glock 49, which is the length of a Glock 17 and the grip of a Glock 19. So it's kind of like a reverse 45. That's why they call it the 49. You can actually try this exact gun out and some other Glock Generation 6. Make sure to tell your club president to get in contact with CNP so you can get to try these out. I've put their Instagram in the description below. Okay, enough yapping. Let's look at the guns. Well, here we are with the Glock Gen 6. In typical Glock fashion, you can see that they really innovated and changed their box. But let's see what they come with. Ta-da! Yeah, it's a Glock. In France, they come with 2 magazines. This bullet pusher, which is what I'm gonna call these now. We have the optics plate thing, the polymer, which we're gonna go over, the new backstrap, and the Glock manuals, which I'm not even gonna take out because at this point everyone on YouTube has seen the Glock manuals. So here we have the Glock 45 Generation 6. For the record, I also have a 17, which got transformed to be like the 47, so it's the same frame. Here's my regular Gen 5 45. This is the Gen 6 45. Let's talk about the trigger first. So they undercut the trigger guard, which allows, according to Glock, for a higher grip support and comfort. Compare it to the Gen 5. You can see the trigger on the Gen 5 on my left is more rounded. On the Gen 6, it's kind of like a flat face if we compress this, so it's more flat face. It's still the same Glock trigger, which, yeah, it's not the best. It kind of sucks. But if you can't shoot a Glock with a Glock trigger and you blame it on this, then you suck. Go train. So let's test the trigger. Gun is safe. So yeah, nothing, honestly nothing to write home about. I'm at the wall, mush, 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 still mush, and brakes. Reset. Yeah. On the Gen 5, it's literally the same thing. So let's disassemble it and see what else is under the hood. To disassemble, it's the same thing as you would do in any Glock. You pull this back. You can notice that these little disassembly takedown pins, levers, whatever, they're actually a lot more pronounced. So it's a lot easier to disassemble the gun. Let's talk about the slide. This is a test pistol. So again, if you want to go shoot it and you're in France, go tell your club president. Let's start with the sights. Glock doesn't care. At this point, they really don't care anymore. It's the same old ugly plastic sights. I guess it's the extra mile that Glock could go for, but they don't really care. Honestly, they've sold so many and they're gonna sell so many of these that it doesn't matter for them. Now, talking about the sighting system and red dots, Glock actually changed their MOS system. So in the past, you needed to put a plate, and the plates that came with the Glocks were actually kind of bad. I never put a Glock optics plate because I've heard a lot of bad things about them. Other people use them and they seem to be fine. But this is totally new for 2026. So if we take this out and we take this out, this small polymer part over here, we have the beautiful new sighting system. So how are you gonna mount new optics? They have different polymer optics plates with different pins over here. So what you do is basically you like clip it over here in the back and push it down, and it should stay there. What Glock says, and their logic for it, is that since it's plastic, the red dot sight is going to go on top and it's going to act kind of like a crush washer to have a very snug fit. They should fit most optics, RMR, EPS, all those kind of optics. But yeah, I think this is really cool because it's a direct mount on the slide, and B, it looks a bit cooler, it looks better. My only problem with this system is that when you put an optic, for example, here on my 45, you can see here that there's no gap because the plate actually covers that gap. On this one, since you would directly mount the optic on the frame, there would actually be a small gap on each side. So you would have to buy an aftermarket plate made for your specific optic, so you don't have that gap here and here. Okay, so now we can take a look at the barrel. Honestly, this is the same Glock Marksman barrel that comes in the Gen 5. However, there have been some changes, and the biggest change is on this small notch that you will see right over here. I got my Gen 5 45 barrel right here, and there's basically no difference. I've heard, I don't know, I'm not gonna try it, you can put a Gen 5 barrel in a Gen 6 Glock and it'll run just fine. Now, if we move on to the recoil spring assembly, Glock went back to a single spring. The reason they went for a double spring, in this case, for the Generation 5, it's because it was made for the 40 caliber round. Since 9mm doesn't really have to have all that power, then they went back to a single spring guide rod. The single spring apparently seems to recoil less, so we'll see that when we go to the range right after this part. And if you see, there's actually less parts that are going to break because there's simply less parts. This is a polymer guide rod because Glock is Glock and Glock loves polymer. I don't know how to feel about this. Apparently, if they say it's reliable, it should be, but I'm sure there's gonna be aftermarket metal recoil rods. On the slide over here, we see the difference between the Gen 6 and the Gen 5. Since they went with the Glock V and they wanted to prevent switches being made, they actually put a bit of a protrusion over here, literally like the Glock V. The striker seems to be a bit thinner, but overall, it's still a Glock. The backplate simply looks slightly different. For the Gen 6, they actually went for maritime spring cups, as you would see in a Glock 19X. My Gen 5 and most Gen 5s don't have maritime spring cups. If you don't know what maritime spring cups are, it's this little kind of crown that goes around the striker, and it's maritime because it has some openings to let the water run through, in and out, so that it doesn't block the striker when it's being held underwater. I'm sure not many people are going to put their Glock underwater, but anyways, whatever. They also changed the extractor. So normally on a Gen 5 you would have the extractor spring right here, which connects all the way to the inside over here. If you pull this out, this will come out, and then your extractor comes out. But in this case, this is different. Okay, so regarding the extractor, I'm not gonna do it because I don't really have the tool and it really kind of doesn't matter. You need to put a small tool over here in this small hole, and you're gonna press down. There's gonna be a distinct click, which then you're gonna press the slide safety over here, and your extractor should come out. So a small tweak, let's see how it performs compared to the Gen 5, which was a very reliable extractor. Glock also changed the slide serrations. So the slide serrations on the Gen 6 are a lot more pronounced. They're also gradual. It's deeper closer to the top of the slide and it's shallower going down, but it gives me a really good grip, which is actually something that I was kind of complaining about my Glock. It does have a tendency to slip. And one time while I was dry firing, it slipped. My gun fell in the chamber and it bit me, and it bit very hard, so it hurt a lot. And the first time I handled the Gen 6, I grabbed it and instantly it doesn't move. So the slide serrations are super nice. I really like them. It's a really good upgrade and I'm glad that Glock did it. Maybe eventually, I guess you could put some on the top over here just to have even more grip, but I mean, do as you want, it's a Glock. Let's take a look at the frame now, and you can see that they look very different. So it's very noticeable that you have a Gen 6 on top compared to a Gen 5. What is similar though is that you have the accessory rail, which is the same. The trigger guard, however, is a bit changed with what's going on here. The trigger we already talked about. They added a gas pedal or a thumb rest over here so that when you're shooting, you put your thumb right here. Because there's a lot of material actually on the Gen 5 and many people were just cutting it. On this one, it does have a tendency to slip. They also added a lot more material right under the slide release compared to the Gen 5, because I guess a lot of shooters were having quite a high grip and it was accidentally activating the slide stop. Because you can see on the Gen 5, there's not a lot. And if we take a look right below, we have the new RTF6 texture from Glock. So this is crazy. Honestly, it feels so good in the hand. So this RTF6 texture combines two textures into one. So it combines the texture from the Gen 5 and one that the Glocks had before from the Gen 3, I think. It's kind of like a tape. I don't know how to describe it other than it feels really good. It's not too aggressive where it's gonna destroy your stomach if you're carrying this appendix, but it does have quite a good grip. And the palm swells feel very nice. They're not too obvious. It makes the gun a little bit more round, but it's still kind of like that blocky Glock look. But right here in the palm of my hand, they feel super nice. I feel like I have a lot more control on the gun. We'll see when we go shoot if actually there's less recoil because of this grip and because of this recoil guide rod. They also extended the beaver tail over here compared to the other one. So the back straps will actually go just up to here. Here I have the back straps. You see they don't have the beaver tail like they would normally have in the Gen 5 because the beaver tail's already included right here, and it's gonna prevent that slide bite, which I haven't gotten any slide bite from Glock by holding it here. Magazine well is also a very slightly enlarged. Mine is damaged from all the dry fire I've done from slamming magazines and missing. They very slightly enlarged the mag well, and if you don't know, Glocks are super easy to reload because it's polymer magazine, so polymer on polymer. It's very easy, there's not a lot of friction. And they have this integrated mag well, which I absolutely love. I think Glocks are super easy to reload. So by it being a teeny tiny bit bigger, it's even better. And talking about magazines, they updated also the magazine release button. It isn't ambidextrous, just like the other Glocks. However, it reminds me a lot of what the 19X magazine release is like. They rounded it off a little bit compared to just the square finishing on the Gen 5. So now that I've yapped, let's go test it at the range. So we made it to the range. I just got here. I got 2 Gen 6s in 45 and 17, and I got 2 Gen 5s in 45 and 17. I'm gonna start by shooting my 45, which is the gun that I'm used to anyways. And then I'll go to the Gen 6 45. So give it a couple of shots. Yeah, I'm basically everywhere, but I'm not trying for accuracy. I'm just looking at how it recoils. Okay, and once that's done, let's do the Gen 6. It doesn't have a red dot, and I normally don't shoot red dot, but since I'm just slamming the trigger, it doesn't really matter. There's a very noticeable difference. I haven't hit any outside of what I'm supposed to hit. Unlike my Gen 5, my dot's kind of running all over. This I just put in the middle and it just goes. Oh yeah, there is a difference. So the grip it's a bit aggressive, but it's cold. I'm shooting at a cold range right now. Let's try the 17. This is a Glock 17 Gen 5. It has a Timney trigger, but I'm not really comparing the triggers right now. I'm just comparing how they shoot. Okay. Let's see how the 17 shoots. This is supposed to be the softest shooting one. This I feel a bit less of a difference, and I'm kind of cold. Like they do feel very good. The fact that there's more grip I think helps. The beaver tail is also quite good. I'm gonna put some more rounds in the 45. This one is quite flat. And then I'm gonna go to the 17 again. Once I go back to my 45. Yeah, you definitely notice the palm swell over here. I have to wipe my hands because it slips more. On the other one, there's more texture. Oh yeah. So there's a dot here, so it's not exactly the same thing because there's gonna be, if there's a red dot here, it's gonna change a bit the balance of the gun, but still there is a noticeable difference on how this one shoots. Now we just gotta see if the recoil guide rod that's in polymer is gonna last. So I'm gonna do half a mag on the 45 Gen 5. And now I'm gonna go to the other one. And again, the slide serrations are a lot more aggressive here, so you can get a better purchase on the slide. I kind of want it now. Yeah, so there is a definitive difference between the 45. I feel there's more of a difference in the 45 than the 17. I suck with irons, it's crazy. But it's okay, last one. Yeah, no, the difference is very nice. I think it's mostly on the grip where you have a better purchase on your gun. I mean, I don't know. Since the 17 has a longer slide, I feel it recoils more, but just because there's more mass. It might be softer, so it's more of a nice longer push. The 45 pushes a bit more here in the web of my hand. You feel like quite a sharper, well, not a sharp snap, but a sharper snap than you would have. And now I'm going back to my 45. No, there is a difference. They did it, honestly. I think it's really nice. The extractor, let's see how it holds up with time. Reliability-wise, didn't have any stoppages at all with any of the guns. They're Glocks, they shouldn't stop. And even getting a red dot, I don't know how much it's gonna change the recoil impulse, but the 45 definitely has that quick snappiness. Yeah, no, it feels very good. Good job, Glock. I'm very happy. Now I'm super mad because I'm actually gonna need to buy a new one. Very happy with what they've done. Okay, so just got done shooting the 45 and the 17. The 45 definitely feels, it kind of feels snappier and faster. Maybe it's because there's no red dot on it. I don't know. But that's the end of the video. Again, thank you very much to Armurerie CNP Tir for lending me these guns and letting me try them. You can try them yourself if you're in the area. Just make sure to contact CNP Tir on their Instagram, which is down below. And until the next one, Dennis, out.